Am I going to wake up in the morning and is my car going to work? Is it going to be fully charged? So electricity supply and demand must be perfectly matched at all times. Historically, we've relied primarily on just turning on power plants, so say natural gas facilities, to meet this demand. But with the increasing amount of renewable generation, which results in more variability on the system, we're looking for more resources to say, rather than just calling on natural gas facilities, can we leverage something that exists in the market? So there's an increasing emphasis on demand side flexibility, which is as simple as saying, hey, can I call upon the customers to reduce their usage at their home? So think about delaying their washer and dryer, turning off lights in their house, avoiding charging their electric vehicle. That right there is the demand side flexibility. A lot of focus is based on how can we unlock the demand side of the market rather than just relying on the supply side. Two common pricing structures that are used all over North America. Time of use pricing is very predictable. Basically, it says every single day from 5 to 10 p.m., I'm going to charge you more money for your electricity consumption. And then from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I'm going to charge you less money. And the idea of that is from 5 to 10 p.m., that's when the grid is under most pressure. So it's very predictable, it just happens every day, people can respond to it. Critical peak pricing, on the other hand, relies on these infrequent events, which basically say that, all right, on Wednesday, it's going to be really cold in Edmonton. There's not going to be a lot of wind generation and not a lot of solar generation. I'm going to send out an alert, so through the utility app or via a text message, that basically calls upon you to lower your demand. And in that one-shot window, I'm going to charge you a higher price. So basically, you can think of it as time of use is very predictable, whereas critical peak pricing is kind of one-shot events that the regulator or the system operator decides. So one big challenge is, rather than just building a bunch of power plants to only operate rarely during these rare events, we can leverage demand-side flexibility. So we're lowering overall system cost while ensuring resiliency to these extreme weather events. Think about the emergency alert that I think everyone in Alberta got on their cell phones a couple weeks ago when we had that extreme cold snap. Effectively, the government was calling upon all Albertans to lower our electricity demand to reduce the strain on the system. But I think there's a much more broader scope of demand-side flexibility, which is basically a structure where we say, I'm going to pay you more money, or I'm going to charge you less money to consume from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. If you can shift your demand outside of that window, I'm going to create incentives for you to do that. That is a really common pricing structure to motivate demand-side flexibility. Back in 2021, the Texas winter storm event, which was very irregular temperature and weather for Texas, the outages that occurred in Texas are largely attributed to two main factors. One is natural gas infrastructure freezing. Basically, they can't bring natural gas to the power plants. And then what compounded the difficulties was historically high electricity demand. And that's resulting from a lot of people using electric heating in Texas to heat their homes. So one big challenge with Texas is they didn't have a robust demand-side flexibility to basically call upon customers to say, it's a system where we're really tight under these hours, I'm going to pay you some money to reduce your demand. Since then, since the 2021 winter storm event, there's been a really big focus on demand-side flexibility in Texas to basically try and avoid future blackouts. In California, they're years ahead of a lot of jurisdictions where they face a challenge where the sun is setting. They have a lot of solar. We all know solar is not going to produce when it's nighttime. So they have to create a system where they can, the grid is under stress. And as the sun sets, we're going to call upon demand-side flexibility to meet that demand. Sometimes that pressure is harder than others. So one tool in the toolkit that California uses is critical peak pricing, where they basically say, tonight as the sun sets, we don't have a lot of imports from neighboring states, we don't have a lot of hydro to leverage, and our natural gas facilities are either on outage or too expensive. So we're going to call on critical peak pricing to fill that gap, to make sure we have a reliable supply of electricity. The challenge with demand-side flexibility is there's some variability in the amount that customers are going to respond. It's not that they're not going to necessarily respond perfectly every day. So that's one challenge with demand response is you can't dispatch it the same way you dispatch a power plant. If you can leverage technology to implement automation, you get a very consistent and predictable level of demand response rather than just these price-based signals. So you can kind of overcome some of the downside of demand-side flexibility. With time of use pricing in particular is that by motivating, say, people with electric vehicles to shift charging from right when they get home from work to say 10 p.m. when the price decreases from that high price time of use block. Everyone plugs in their car or schedules their charger to start exactly at 10 p.m. Well, that's an instance that we're finding that the cure can kind of be worse than the disease, where you actually get a really big spike in electricity demand on the local neighborhood when they're plugging in their electric vehicles. So rather than having a spike when everyone gets home, you effectively are moving that spike to 10 p.m. A challenge with time of use pricing is it can serve as a coordinating device, which is what we're worried about, to coordinate EVs to later in the night, which then can create problems for the engineers on the distribution network. So it's kind of an unintended consequence of TOU that I think people are just starting to grapple with. There are ways to enhance the demand-side flexibility by leveraging the automation in a smart way. If you tell the automation to start for everyone at the same time, you're just moving that peak from where you're trying to get away from to a new point in time. So engineers and system operators are smart, and they know that we can sequence the automation to turn on at different times. So rather than turning everyone on at the same time, we can sequence the automation to say, you start at 10 p.m., you start at 10:15, you start at 10:45, etc. And basically you set two parameters. You plug your car in at night, and we say, we don't want you to charge at 5 p.m. Okay, well, tell us the target you want to charge. So you want to charge it up to 80% of your battery, and when you want to leave. And effectively, we're gonna manage the charging overnight, so shift exactly when your car charges, but we're gonna guarantee exactly your charge target of 80% and then guarantee it's fully charged by 8 a.m. So those serve as hard constraints in the algorithm. But I think one thing that people don't realize is if you have a level 2 charger, typically we're finding in the data, most people charge anywhere from a little less than an hour to 2 hours a night, but they're plugged in to charge from anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in how we can sequence the electric vehicles in a neighborhood, for example, on, okay, I'll charge you first, and I'll charge your neighbor second, and I'll charge their neighbor third, right? We don't need to charge everyone at the same time, but we can guarantee that we're satisfying these really important constraints for customers.